He wasn't supposed to live. Not after the crash. Not after they pulled him from his mother's broken body in a field of twisted metal. And yet, he did. Paralyzed, silent, alive, but unreachable. For 3 years, not a smile, not a sound. Doctors came, experts flew in. They said the same thing. There's nothing left inside. Then one afternoon, Alexander walked into the house. And what he saw stopped him cold. The Hill estate was quiet, but not the kind of quiet that brings peace. It was the silence of absence, of prayers unanswered, of a man who had stopped believing anything good could still grow. 3 years earlier, everything changed in a moment. A rain-slick road, a curve taken too fast. A car flipped, crushed beyond recognition. Inside was Lauren Hill, 8 months pregnant. By the time they got her out, she was gone. No heartbeat, no breath. But in a moment that can only be called divine, a group of passing soldiers managed to save the baby. David Hill was born on the side of the road, in the wreckage of what should have been the end. But his first cry never came. And for years after that, nothing did. No movement, no words, no signs of life beyond the machines that kept him breathing. Alexander, broken and buried in grief, did what powerful men do. He tried to fix it. He hired the best, flew in specialists from every continent, built a schedule of treatments, therapies, and strategies. But no one could reach the boy. Until her, Christina Baker, a maid. No credentials, no clipboard, just a steady voice, a soft presence, and a faith that somehow refused to leave the room. Before we begin, if you believe God still works through ordinary people, if you've ever felt His presence in the quiet, or if you've ever loved someone the world had already given up on, then like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share in the comments where you're watching from, and what you believe about miracles. Because sometimes healing doesn't come through science. Sometimes it comes through the hands of someone who simply refuses to walk away. The house was still, not just quiet still, not the kind of stillness you get from peace, but the kind that lingers after too many years of grief. The kind of stillness that settles in your bones when you've stopped expecting anything to change. Alexander Hill pushed open the front door without thinking. It clicked softly behind him. No voices, no footsteps, just the familiar hush of marble beneath his shoes and the distant hum of the machines in his son's room. He was home early. The board meeting had ended with numbers and noise, but none of it stayed with him. Lately, nothing did. He loosened his tie and stepped into the foyer. And then, he stopped. Right there, frozen. His eyes landed on the one thing he had trained himself not to hope for. His son, walking, unsteady, wobbly, but walking, across the wide expanse of the hallway floor, tiny feet slapping softly against the marble, arms open, face glowing, and the smile. God, the smile. It wasn't random. It wasn't forced. It was full, real, directed at someone just beyond his field of vision. Then came the sound. A word, a whisper. Tina. It came out fragile, almost floating, but unmistakable. A name. Alexander's briefcase slipped from his fingers and hit the floor with a dull thud. He didn't flinch. He didn't move. Across from his son, kneeling on the floor in a navy uniform, was the maid. Christina Baker. She wasn't touching him. Just holding space. Her arms open, her eyes shining, her whole being lit up like she was watching the sunrise after years of rain. She said nothing, just waited. Present, still, certain. And somehow, that was enough. David took one more step. Then another, and then he fell gently into her arms, giggled, rested his head on her shoulder like he'd done it 100 times before. And Alexander, the man who had spent 3 years building a fortress around his heart, stood in his own house and couldn't breathe. He blinked, thinking maybe it wasn't real. Maybe it was a flicker of light, a trick of memory, some buried dream. But it wasn't. He heard it again, this time softer but clearer. Tina. A name. Not assigned, not rehearsed. Chosen. And the boy wasn't looking for his father. He wasn't reaching for a therapist, or a nurse, or the million-dollar machines lined up beside his bed. He had walked. To her. The woman Alexander had barely spoken to. The maid who was supposed to clean the house, not change it. He didn't know how long he stood there. Could have been seconds, could have been hours. But something had shifted inside him. Something that had been cold for a long time had just cracked open. He stepped back slowly, letting the moment stay untouched. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel safe. It felt unfamiliar, alive. He moved down the hallway, his steps slower now, measured, careful, like he wasn't sure if he was still walking through his own house, or stepping into a story he wasn't ready to believe in. A faint hum drifted from the nursery. Not a machine, not a monitor, a voice. Low, steady, singing. Not for performance, not for therapy, just a lullaby. Simple, soft, spoken like a prayer. He paused outside the room and listened. For a long time, he had believed God had left them. He'd buried his name alongside his wife's. But now, standing in this hallway, with the sound of his son's laughter echoing down the walls, he wasn't so sure anymore. Maybe God hadn't left. Maybe he'd just sent someone they weren't expecting. Not a specialist, not a miracle worker, just a woman with quiet hands and a heart that refused to give up on a boy who hadn't even learned how to reach. And now, he was reaching. The Hill estate was built to keep things in and to keep things out. 4 stories tall, tucked behind black iron gates, it sat like a monument to silence on the edge of the city, all glass, steel, and stone. No laughter echoed down the halls. No music played from the rooms. Even the light felt expensive, but cold. Alexander had designed it that way. After the funeral, after the casket was lowered, after the news stories faded, he didn't want reminders. Not of Lauren, not of hope, not of the family that would never be. So he made the house sterile, controlled, predictable. It was the one thing he still had control over. Every surface wiped twice. Every schedule monitored to the minute. He installed oxygen backups, therapy equipment, 2 live-in nurses, and a private pediatric ICU on the 2nd floor. No clutter, no mess, no sound. But all the silence in the world couldn't drown out the ache of what wasn't there. David's room sat in the west wing. Wide windows, temperature-regulated floors. A state-of-the-art hospital bed built custom. Machines lined the wall like soldiers. They blinked and beeped and sighed through the night, reminding Alexander that his son was still alive. But barely. The boy had never laughed, never reached for anything. He spent most days staring past the people trying to save him, as if he wasn't sure whether he'd actually made it into this world or not. Alexander told himself it wasn't personal. The doctors said not to expect emotion. They told him David might never know who he was, so he stopped trying to make a connection. He focused on progress charts instead, on results, scans, second opinions. It hurt less that way. Then, quietly, someone new showed up. Christina Baker. No announcement, no orientation. Just a name added to the payroll and a note from the estate manager. New cleaning hire, good references, quiet type. Alexander didn't notice her at first. That wasn't unusual. Most staff moved through the house like shadows, polite, efficient, invisible. Christina was no different. Black woman, early 30s, simple uniform. She moved gently, spoke only when spoken to, and never lingered. She wasn't hired to be noticed. But David noticed. Not right away, but slowly, subtly. One morning, Alexander passed the nursery and caught something odd. The curtains were open. The light was softer. There was music faint, like someone humming. Not from the speakers, from a voice. He paused, but didn't step in. The next day, he walked past again. Books had been left out on the chair. Toys arranged not in rows, but in little piles like someone had actually been playing with them. He checked with the nurses. No one claimed it. Then he saw her, Christina, sitting cross-legged on the floor beside the crib, reading softly from a children's book, even though David didn't move. At first, he said nothing. He watched, quietly, from a distance. He told himself she was wasting time, that the boy couldn't hear her, that whatever she thought she was doing wasn't real. But she didn't stop. Day after day, she showed up, folded laundry while singing under her breath, cleaned the windows while humming lullabies, brushed the boy's hair like he could feel every stroke. It wasn't loud. It wasn't grand. But something in the room had changed, and Alexander felt it. Late one night, unable to sleep, he opened the baby monitor footage out of habit. He'd stopped watching it regularly, most nights were uneventful. But this time, he saw something different. David's eyes were following her, tracking her as she moved across the room. His fingers twitched when she got close. His breathing steadied when she whispered. Christina didn't seem aware. She just kept speaking, like she was holding space for something invisible. "It's okay, sweetheart," she said gently, brushing his forehead. "You don't have to do anything. Just rest. I'm right here." Alexander sat back in his chair, stunned. It wasn't therapy. It wasn't science. It wasn't even measurable. But it was presence. The next morning, he asked one of the nurses quietly, "Has he ever responded to her?" She paused, then nodded. "More than anyone else," she said softly. "We weren't sure if you wanted to know." He didn't answer, because he didn't know. By the end of that week, the nursery looked different. Still clean, still quiet, but softer. There was warmth now, in the way the light fell across the rug, in the way David's eyes lingered a little longer, in the small cloth-bound notebook Christina kept near the crib. Inside were pages of handwritten notes, observations, reactions, moments, things no one else had thought to write down. She wasn't tracking data. She was bearing witness. And that's when something began to shift in Alexander Hill. Not all at once, but like a hallway slowly filling with light. He still didn't understand what was happening. He still didn't want to call it faith. But deep down, somewhere past all the grief, he knew. This woman wasn't just cleaning his house. She was tending to something sacred, something every expert had missed. Christina Baker never expected to be seen. She'd been in the house for 7 weeks. No one really spoke to her. Not the nurses, not the therapists, not even Mr. Hill. She didn't mind. She hadn't come to be noticed. She came to do the job clean, quietly, respectfully. But from the moment she stepped into David's room, she knew something was wrong. Not just with the machines or the silence. Not just with his tiny limbs curled stiff against the mattress, but with the air. It felt hollow, like everyone had already given up, like the house itself was holding its breath. That first day, she had paused in the doorway, mop in hand. David lay still, eyes half open, facing the window. She whispered a simple greeting. "Hi, baby." His eyes didn't move, but she spoke again anyway. "It's okay if you don't talk back. I'll still talk to you." And she did. Every day, after that. While folding sheets. While wiping windows. While sweeping the corners no one ever looked at. She didn't ask for permission. She just showed up. Again, and again, and again. In her bag, she kept a small notebook, leather-bound, worn at the edges. It wasn't for work. It was for him. She wrote down everything. Every flicker, every blink, every twitch of his hand when she spoke near him. She wasn't sure what it meant. But she believed something was waking up. Not because of her, but because she was willing to be still long enough to listen. One morning, she found a notebook behind the bookshelf in the nursery. Old, dusty, nearly falling apart. Inside the handwriting of a woman she'd never met. Lauren Hill. The pages were filled with prayers. Letters to a baby she hadn't held yet. A lullaby she'd written in the final month of her pregnancy. "If you ever forget my voice," it read, Let this song remind you that I was here, that I loved you before I ever saw your face. Christina traced the words with her fingers. Then, quietly, she began to hum the tune. That afternoon, David blinked. Once, twice. Then again when she sang it near him. She leaned closer. "You know that song?" she whispered. His fingers curled slightly. She didn't call the nurses. She didn't log it in the system. She just sang the lullaby again. Not loud. Not for results. But like a prayer. Alexander passed by the door later that evening, paused for a moment, watched as Christina sat beside the crib, humming softly, a book open in her lap. He didn't say a word, but she felt him watching. That night, she wrote in her notebook, "He looked at me today. I think he's starting to remember this world." The next day, the shift became undeniable. David followed her voice when she moved across the room. His hand twitched when she brushed past the mobile above his bed. His breathing deepened when she touched his shoulder. And then a sound. Not a word. Not quite. But a low murmur. A broken breath shaped like something trying to be spoken. Christina froze. Tears rose before she could stop them. She reached down, her hand resting on his. "You're not alone," she whispered. "You've never been." Alexander heard it on the baby monitor later that night. He replayed the clip 5 times. Then again, a noise. From David, directed at her. He stormed into the nursery the next morning, not angry, but rattled. Christina was stacking books on the shelf. She turned calmly when he entered. "Did you teach him that?" he asked, eyes sharp. "No," she said softly. "I didn't teach him anything. I just showed up." He made a sound. "Yes." He stared at her, unsure what to feel. His voice cracked a mix of confusion and something he hadn't let himself feel in years. "Why you?" Christina stepped forward, voice gentle. "I think children know when someone sees them. Not with eyes, with spirit." He didn't answer. But he didn't walk away either. That evening, Christina found David's baby monitor disconnected. She didn't ask why. But the next day, Alexander stood in the corner of the nursery longer than usual. He didn't say a word, didn't try to interfere, just watched her sing. And for the first time, he didn't see the maid. He saw the woman who had stayed. The one who had shown up, even when the rest of the world had walked away. The house was quiet, but not like before. There was something inside the stillness now. A tremble, like the walls were waiting for something to happen. It had been 2 days since David made that sound. 2 days since Alexander had watched, in disbelief, as his son, the boy he was told would never speak, tried to shape a word. Not with intention, not perfectly, but clearly, for someone. For her. Christina hadn't mentioned it since. She didn't bring it up, didn't celebrate, didn't make it about her. She just kept showing up. Each morning, she folded his pajamas into soft rectangles. She opened the curtains just a little more. She sang the same lullaby with the same quiet reverence, as if she were singing it to heaven itself. And David responded, not with full words yet, but with presence. His fingers stretched toward her when she got close. His chest rose and fell in rhythm when she whispered. And sometimes, just for a second, he smiled. Alexander didn't know what to do with any of it. He wasn't angry. He wasn't grateful. He was afraid. Because this wasn't what the doctors promised. This wasn't what the money was for. There was no science behind lullabies. No research study in gentle hands and quiet prayers. No measurable data in presence. He stood at the nursery door longer now. Sometimes just outside the frame. Sometimes in full view. He watched the way Christina looked at his son. Not with pity, not with fear, but with faith. And it made something ache in him. Something deep. Something old. One night, long after everyone had gone to bed, Alexander sat in his late wife's music room. The piano was still covered with a cloth. Her journal sat on the shelf, undisturbed. Everything was where she'd left it. He opened the notebook, turned the pages slowly. The ink had faded, but her words were still alive. Lyrics. Melodies. Notes to a child she never got to meet. I hope you love softly. I hope you find someone who sees you. And when you forget who you are, I hope a song reminds you. He closed the book and rested it on his lap. The silence in the room felt different now. Not empty. Just waiting. The next morning, it rained. Hard. Wind against the windows. Thunder in the distance. David was restless. His eyes darted toward the storm, his breathing shallow. Christina stayed close. She held his hand, hummed to calm his nerves. And then, he said it. Ma. It came like a breath. Soft, cracked, barely formed. But it wasn't a sound. It was a word. Christina froze. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. Her hand went to her mouth. Across the hall, Alexander heard it. He didn't rush in. He walked. Slowly. Carefully. Like he was approaching something holy. He stepped into the room. David was looking at Christina. His mouth open, trying again. Ma. Not loud. Not clear. But real. Alexander stood still, eyes locked on his son. He hadn't heard that word in 3 years. Not since the night Lauren died. He's naming you, he whispered. Christina didn't speak. She just nodded, tears falling freely now. Not out of pride. Not out of surprise. But out of love. He knows who I am, she said softly. The room held its breath. Even the storm outside seemed to still. And in that silence, something broke open inside Alexander. Not all the way. Not yet. But a crack. Big enough for light to come through. Later that night, Christina found him standing by the nursery door again. This time, he didn't look away. Do you think she'd be proud? He asked, voice hoarse. Christina turned to him, gently. I think she'd be grateful. He still remembers how to love. Neither of them spoke for a while. They just stood in the quiet, listening to the soft sound of David's breathing. And, somewhere deep inside the house, in the space where grief had made its home, hope was making its way back in. They called it an anomaly. The sound David made, the way his eyes followed her, the movement in his fingers when Christina touched his hand. Dr. Kent flew in from Sweden 3 days after the incident. Alexander had sent the footage, the monitor logs, even a full report handwritten by the nurses. Kent reviewed it all from behind wire-rimmed glasses, his tone professional, even polite. But when he looked up, the verdict was clear. It's not language. It's not motor progress. What is it then? Alexander asked. A reflex, Kent said, without flinching. Emotional mimicry. A neurological echo, perhaps. Nothing reliable. Alexander didn't speak. Not immediately. But something inside him tightened. Not in anger, in disappointment. Because Kent wasn't wrong. He just wasn't right. The room was quiet after he left. Christina stood by the hallway window, watching the wind stir the trees. She didn't ask what the doctor said. Alexander leaned against the doorway, his voice low. He says it's just a reaction, reflexive, meaningless. She didn't turn. Do you believe that? He didn't answer. He looked at her hands. Gentle, steady. The kind of hands that didn't need data to do something sacred. I used to believe in results, he said quietly. Now I don't know what to believe. Christina looked at him then. Not with judgment, with empathy. You don't have to name it yet, she said. Just don't walk away from it. That night, David didn't sleep well. He whined when the nurses approached, refused the bottle, turned his face to the wall. It was Christina who calmed him. No medicine, no monitor. Just her hand on his back and a whisper in his ear. You're safe. I'm right here. Alexander watched from the hallway, arms crossed. Every instinct in him said to interrupt, to take control. But his feet wouldn't move. He just stood there. Frozen. Broken. Open. Later, in his study, he pulled out the old photo album Lauren had made. It smelled like her perfume. Faint, floral, fading with time. Page after page sonograms, notes from prenatal checkups, letters to Baby Hill. And then, a photo. One he had forgotten. Lauren at the piano, one hand on her belly, the other stretched across the keys. She was smiling, eyes closed, alive. He ran his thumb along the page and whispered to the empty room. He said, "Mama, to someone who wasn't you." And it felt right. And I don't know what to do with that. The silence didn't answer, but something stirred in his chest. Not guilt. Not shame. Something closer to surrender. The next morning, the therapy center called. They'd seen a clip of David reaching. They wanted to evaluate him, in person. They also mentioned Christina. One of the center's executives had heard about her. "She has a gift," they said. "We'd like to offer her a full-time role, triple her salary, full housing, clinical training. She's a rare find." Alexander didn't respond. He hung up the phone slowly. His fingers stayed curled around the receiver long after the call ended. Down the hall, David was laughing. Laughing. Not just a noise. A sound with spirit. Christina was making animal noises behind a stuffed giraffe. David reached for it with both hands. His head tilted back, his mouth wide, and Alexander watched with quiet disbelief. It wasn't therapy. It wasn't intervention. It was something else. Something the doctors never brought into the room. That evening, he found Christina sitting by the garden, notebook open on her lap. She didn't look up as he approached. "They called me," he said. "The center?" she asked softly. He nodded. "They want to offer you a job, full-time, more than I pay, a whole career." She closed the notebook gently, stared out at the trees, swaying in the dusk. "I didn't apply," she said. "You don't have to explain." "But I thought about it," she added. He didn't speak. "I came here to clean floors," she continued. "But then I saw him, and I couldn't walk away." Alexander's throat tightened. "Are you going to leave?" She didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, "He's not mine." He looked at her. Really looked. For the first time, he saw the woman who had poured herself into someone else's child, with no guarantee, no spotlight, no reward. Just love. Quiet, faithful, free. He walked back to the house, went straight to his office, opened the drawer, and pulled out a folder. Inside, a legal document. Partial guardianship. Flexible terms. No traps. Just an open door. Christina found the folder on the kitchen island the next morning. No note. No explanation. Just a line drawn softly in the sand. Stay. Not as a maid. As someone who matters. It rained the night it happened. A steady, low hum against the glass. The kind of rain that didn't shout. It lingered. Soft, persistent. Like it was trying to wash something clean. Christina was in the nursery, humming under her breath. Same lullaby. Same rhythm. She didn't look tired, but something in her eyes had changed. She moved a little slower. Didn't linger as long. When she picked David up, it was careful, not casual. Alexander noticed. Even David noticed. He reached for her more that day. Held her sleeve tighter when she tried to lay him down. Watched her like he was afraid she'd disappear when he blinked. And then, in the middle of the thunder, he said it. "Tina." Clear. Soft. Real. Christina froze. Her hands dropped slowly to her sides. Her eyes welled, but no tears fell. She looked at him like her heart was breaking in the most beautiful and terrible way. Alexander stepped into the room just as she whispered back, "I'm here." That night, she didn't stay as long. She folded his blanket neatly, placed her notebook in her bag, and left without a word. Alexander stood by the window, watching her silhouette cross the driveway under an umbrella. And for the first time, it struck him. She was leaving differently. Not just the house. She was beginning to leave him. The next morning, David was quiet. No smiles, no giggles, just silence. He lay on the rug where he and Christina usually played, staring at the door. The nurses noticed. Tried toys, music, sensory games. Nothing worked. He didn't cry. He just withdrew. The light in his eyes dimmed, like something he couldn't explain was slipping away. Alexander watched from the hallway, and for the first time in his life, he felt helpless in a way that money couldn't fix. He found her in the kitchen later that night. She was packing something into a paper bag, small, quiet movements. "You're thinking about leaving," he said. She didn't jump. She didn't deny it. "The offer's still on the table," she said quietly. "But I made one too." "I know." She closed the bag gently, rested her hands on the counter. "You've been kind, more than you had to be. But this—" She paused. "This wasn't part of the plan." Alexander stepped closer. "He called your name." Her voice trembled. "That's what scares me." He didn't understand. "Why?" She finally looked at him. "Because he's starting to believe I'll always be here." The words hit deeper than he expected. "And you won't?" he asked. Her face softened, but the answer was honest. "I don't know. Do you want to leave?" A long silence followed. Then, barely above a whisper, "No, but sometimes wanting isn't enough." He leaned on the counter, hands gripping the edge. "I built this house to protect him. Every inch, every protocol. I did everything I could. I know. And none of it mattered, not until you walked in." She didn't smile. She didn't flinch. Maybe he didn't need protection. Maybe he just needed to be seen. He went quiet. The rain picked up again, harder this time, falling like it had something to say. Later that night, he found the paper bag she left on the table. Inside was the lullaby, Lauren's handwriting, folded neatly beside a note in Christina's hand. "He remembers her voice because you let her stay in this house. He found mine because I stayed when no one asked me to. But love like this can't live in limbo forever." He walked down the hall, stopped outside David's room. The boy was asleep, arms wrapped around the stuffed giraffe Christina had given him. His chest rose and fell slowly. But even in sleep, he looked like he was waiting. Alexander stayed at the door long after midnight, and for the first time, he didn't ask what to do. He asked what he was willing to lose. The house felt different now. Not louder, not warmer, just honest. The kind of stillness that follows after something sacred has been said out loud. Not broken, but open. Christina came to work the next morning. No bags, no announcements. Just her, moving through the house with the same quiet grace, the same soft voice. But something had shifted. Alexander noticed it when she passed him in the hall. She nodded, polite, present, but her eyes didn't linger. There was no coldness, no anger, only space, like she was giving him room to decide what kind of man he wanted to be. David noticed it too. He didn't laugh that day, didn't babble or stretch his hands as much. He stayed near the window, tracing the fog with one finger. Waiting. Christina didn't force it. She didn't try to reclaim his attention. She sat with him on the floor, soft music humming in the background. Read aloud even when his eyes wandered. Sang the lullaby even when he didn't respond. She had never come for results. She came to love him, whether or not he reached back. Alexander spent most of the day in his office. The guardianship folder sat unopened beside him, still unsigned. The pen lay next to it, like a quiet dare. He stared at the paperwork, line after line of legal language designed to offer structure, security, permanence. But no contract could define what Christina had become to his son. She wasn't his mother. She wasn't his nurse. And yet, when David said her name, he said it like it meant safety, like it meant home. By afternoon, Alexander found himself outside the nursery again. He didn't step in, just stood at the edge of the doorway, watching. Christina was drawing with David on the rug. Large crayons, simple shapes, a sun, a tree, a crooked house. David looked up and made a soft sound. Not a word, not yet. But intent was there. Christina smiled at him. "It's okay," she said. "You don't have to say everything. I already know." Alexander felt the weight of those words settle in his chest. He realized how long it had been since anyone said something like that to him. Later that night, he passed the kitchen. She was there again, wiping down the counter, slow and thoughtful. He walked in, quiet. "I saw the drawing," he said. She turned slightly, unsure where he was going with it. "He drew a house," Alexander continued, "and a stick figure with curly hair. That's you, right?" She smiled softly. "He didn't tell me. He doesn't have to." There was a pause. Full. Fragile. Then Alexander placed something on the island. The guardianship folder. This time signed. "It's not everything," he said, "but it's something. Something real." She didn't touch it. Not yet. She looked up at him slowly. "Why now?" she asked. His answer came without hesitation. "Because when he reaches for you, it's the only time I know he feels safe, and I've spent 3 years trying to give him that, but you already have." "This isn't just a job, Alexander," she said gently. "This is a life." "I know. And once we say yes to that, we can't go back." "I don't want to." He looked at her. Not as an employer. Not as a man trying to fix something. Just a father. A man who had failed to keep love alive, and was now being given a second chance. She reached for the folder. Not with haste. Not with fear. She just laid her hand on it, quietly, and nodded. The next day, the house began to change. Curtains stayed open. The hum of machines was joined by faint laughter. Toys were left where David last played with them. Books, half finished. Drawings taped gently to the fridge. Life wasn't being kept under glass anymore. It was being lived clumsily, honestly, beautifully. That evening, they had a picnic in the garden. Just the 3 of them. No celebration. No photographers. No staff. Christina baked a cake. David smashed it with both hands. Alexander laughed without thinking. Really laughed. It was uneven, awkward, like a man learning how to breathe again. At one point, a neighbor leaned over the fence. "Are you the nanny?" they asked Christina. Before she could respond, David waddled up with frosting on his cheeks and sticky hands outstretched. "Mama," he said. Loud, clear, without hesitation. Christina froze. Alexander looked at her. No words. But in his eyes, "Thank you." It was quiet again. Not the silence of grief. Not the hush of a house holding its breath. This was a different kind of quiet. Soft, living, awake. The kind that exists in early mornings, before the world remembers to be afraid. 1 week had passed since the picnic, since David looked up, hands covered in frosting, and called her Mama. Since Alexander stood in the garden, stunned, and didn't correct him. He hadn't said the word himself, but he didn't have to. In his eyes, it was already true. Inside the nursery, the room had changed. Not dramatically, just enough. Toys weren't arranged anymore. They were left where David had dropped them. Books stayed open, mid-story. Drawings curled slightly on the wall where the tape didn't quite stick. There was life now. Messy, beautiful life. Christina arrived early that morning. She moved quietly, as always. But there was something new in the way she walked. Not hesitation. Not doubt. Readiness. Alexander was already at the table. A mug of coffee in front of him. Cold. The folder sat between them. Guardianship papers. Finalized. Everything in order. She sat down without a word. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she reached for the pen. Her hand didn't tremble. She signed her name. Slow, steady. A single act that carried the weight of something holy. She didn't look at him, but she smiled. Later that afternoon, Alexander stood outside the nursery door. David was sitting on the rug, stacking blocks with full concentration. Christina sat beside him, her legs crossed, head tilted, humming softly. David looked up and pointed. "Tina," he said, grinning. Then, without thinking, he climbed into her lap. She wrapped her arms around him like it was the most natural thing in the world. Alexander's chest tightened, not with fear, not with jealousy, but with something that felt like awe, because for the first time in years, his son had chosen someone, and someone had chosen him back. That night, they sat on the back porch. The sky was heavy with stars. David had fallen asleep an hour earlier, curled between his stuffed giraffe and the lullaby notebook. Alexander handed Christina a cup of tea. "You didn't have to say yes," he said. "I didn't," she replied. He glanced at her. "But you did." She nodded. "Because love is a choice, and I'd rather choose him with no guarantees than walk away with everything safe." The words hit deeper than he expected. "I don't think I ever chose him," he said. "Not fully. I loved him, but I was scared to love something that might leave me again." "He never asked you not to be scared," she said gently. "He just needed you to stay." They sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence that doesn't ask for anything. Then Alexander spoke again, barely above a whisper. "Do you think I failed him?" Christina looked straight ahead. Her voice came soft, but full of conviction. "No, I think you were broken. And broken people don't fail. They just take longer to heal." "And what about you?" he asked. "Are you healed?" She exhaled. "I think I stopped waiting to be." The next morning, something changed. It was subtle, but real. David stood without support. Just for a second. Just long enough to wobble in place, arms stretched toward the kitchen where Christina stood washing fruit. "Mama," he said, and then he laughed. It wasn't controlled, wasn't coaxed. It just came, full of joy, full of breath. Alexander stood behind him. He didn't rush forward, didn't call a therapist, didn't reach for his phone. He just watched and smiled. That night, he tucked David in himself. The machines were quieter now, less intrusive. David blinked slowly, fighting sleep. "Daddy," he murmured. The word was soft, still forming, but real. Alexander sat at the edge of the bed. "I'm here." David closed his eyes, and for the first time, he didn't stir when the lights dimmed. He just slept, peacefully. In the hallway, Christina waited. "He said, Daddy," she whispered. Alexander nodded. "He's choosing both of us." They stood there, just outside the door, surrounded by quiet. Not as a man and his maid, but as something closer to a family, still forming, still fragile, but real. And in the silence, hope didn't whisper. It stayed. It had been 6 months. The house didn't look like it used to. Curtains were always open now. Toys lived on the floor like they belonged there. Music floated through the halls, sometimes soft jazz, sometimes lullabies, sometimes just Christina's voice humming under her breath. The marble still shone. The machines still clicked in quiet corners. But the cold was gone. It had been replaced by something slower and alive. David was stronger now. He still needed help standing for too long, still struggled with words sometimes, but he laughed often. He reached. He sang pieces of songs when Christina made pancakes, and when she left the room, he always looked for her. The therapy center had followed up 3 times. Each time, Christina politely declined. She never raised her voice, never explained herself. She didn't have to. She had already made her choice. She stayed. One Saturday morning, Alexander walked out to the backyard with a mug of coffee in hand. The air smelled like spring. In the center of the garden, a new swing set stood adaptive, custom-designed, built with Christina's notes. David sat in the padded swing seat, giggling, legs kicking gently. Christina stood beside him, giving soft pushes, murmuring encouragement. The sun lit her curls like a halo. Alexander stood back, watching. Something about the scene made him still, not because it surprised him, but because it didn't anymore. A neighbor leaned over the fence. "Is she the nanny?" Christina turned, about to answer, but David beat her to it. He pointed, his voice loud, sure, proud. "Mama!" The word cut through the morning like a song. Christina's hands went still on the swing ropes. Her eyes widened, mouth slightly open. Then a smile broke through, wide and wordless. She looked at Alexander. He was already looking at her. He didn't say anything. Didn't need to. His face said everything. "Thank you. I see you. He's yours, too." Later that evening, After the sun had slipped behind the trees and the yard was quiet, they sat on the nursery floor, just the three of them. David leaned against Christina's side, eyelids heavy. One of his hands rested on Alexander's knee. The other curled around the edge of his blanket. The lullaby notebook was open beside them. A page, dog-eared. A corner torn from where David had once tried to eat it. No one was in a hurry to speak. Then Christina whispered, "Do you think she'd be proud of him?" The room held still. Alexander didn't answer right away. He looked down at the boy between them, at the small body once surrounded by machines, at the breath that now came freely. "I think," he said slowly, "she'd be proud of all of us." David stirred, murmured something soft. Neither word nor sound. Just trust. And in that moment, the nursery, once cold, once quiet, once guarded, felt like something else entirely. Not a hospital wing, not a waiting room for progress, but a home. They sat there a while longer, no need for words. Alexander's hand rested gently on Christina's. Not grasping, not asking, just there. And when he finally stood to turn off the light, he paused, looked back at the woman who was never meant to matter, at the child who had never been expected to live, and he realized they saved each other. No one spoke about titles anymore. There was no need. No one cared about contracts, resumes, roles. There was just a boy, a woman, and a father who finally understood that love is not earned with effort. It's built with presence, and chosen again and again. Outside, the wind moved softly through the trees. Somewhere in the dark, a swing creaked gently in the breeze. Inside, there was no noise, but it wasn't silence. It was peace. They weren't a perfect family, but they were a real one, and that was enough. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who still believes in quiet miracles. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us below who's the one person that showed up in your life when the world thought all hope was gone. Because sometimes the ones who were never meant to matter are the ones who change everything. Angela heard the cry just after dawn, faint, desperate, coming from behind the kitchen. She followed the sound to the trash bins and froze. There, inside the dumpster, wrapped in a yellow blanket, was a newborn baby, lips blue, barely breathing. She pulled the child out and held her close, trying to warm her tiny body. And that's when Julian Marshall's car pulled up. He stepped out, saw his housekeeper standing by the dumpster, holding a baby he'd never seen before. And in that moment, everything he thought he knew about her shattered. Julian Marshall had cut his London business trip short to surprise his 8-year-old daughter Emma before her Friday school recital. The September morning was cool and quiet. He pulled into the estate at 6:30 a.m., earlier than anyone expected, and then he saw her. Angela David, his housekeeper of 3 years, standing near the trash bins behind the kitchen, holding a screaming newborn wrapped in yellow. Julian's entire body went rigid. "What the hell is this, Mr. Marshall?" Angela spun around, eyes wide with shock and relief. "I didn't know you were coming home." "Whose baby is that?" Julian's voice was ice cold. Angela stepped toward him, the baby pressed against her chest. "Sir, please, just let me explain." "Explain?" Julian was already moving closer, his mind racing through impossible scenarios. "Did you give birth? Is this yours? How long has this been going on?" "It's not mine." "Then whose is it?" His voice rose, sharp and cutting. "Do you understand what you've done? My daughter lives here. I trusted you." The baby screamed louder, as if feeling the tension. Derek, the estate security officer, appeared from the side entrance, his hand on his radio. "Mr. Marshall, everything okay?" Julian didn't take his eyes off Angela. "I don't know yet." Angela's hands trembled. "Please, sir, just read the note. It's not what you think. This is about your family, not mine." Julian froze. "What did you just say?" Angela's voice broke as tears filled her eyes. "His name is David. He's your nephew. And 3 days ago, his mother left him in that dumpster to die. Before we begin, hit like, subscribe, and tell me where in the world you're watching from. And if you've ever been blamed for something you didn't do, if you've ever saved someone and got punished for it, This story will break your heart and put it back together. Because sometimes God uses the most broken people to do the most beautiful things. Julian's legs went weak. My nephew. The words barely came out. David's been dead for 6 months. Angela pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket. Her hands were shaking. Madison left this. Julian took it. The handwriting was jagged, desperate. I can't do this alone. David's gone. The money's gone. I'm gone. Please save him. Don't let them take him. I'm sorry. M. He read it twice before it made sense. She was pregnant? His voice broke. Nobody knew. Tears streamed down Angela's face. She gave birth alone. 3 days ago, she left him in that dumpster to die. Julian stared at the baby. His brother's son. Where is she now? I don't know. Angela's voice cracked. Her apartment's empty. Her phone's dead. I've been searching everywhere. Hospitals, shelters. Nothing. 3 days. Julian's face went pale. You've had him for 3 days? You were in London. And the note, she begged me not to let them take him. So I used everything. My rent money. $527. I've been hiding him in my room because I was terrified. Daddy? Julian froze. Emma stood in the kitchen doorway, still in her pajamas, holding her stuffed rabbit. Emma, go back inside. Is the baby okay? Her voice was so small, so scared. Did you tell Daddy? Julian's heart stopped. Emma. He knelt down slowly. What are you talking about? She looked at Angela, then back at him. I've been helping her, Daddy. At night, after you tuck me in, I go to Angela's room and help feed him. The air left Julian's lungs. His 8-year-old daughter, sneaking out, caring for a baby he didn't even know existed, while he was halfway across the world. Completely blind, he stood up, his voice barely holding together. Derek, pull up the security footage, right now. Inside the small office, Derek's fingers moved across the keyboard. September 18th, 2:47 a.m. The screen flickered to life. A car rolled through the back gate, slow, almost ghost-like. A woman stepped out. Julian leaned closer. Madison. She looked hollow, empty, like she wasn't really there anymore. She opened the back door, pulled out something, wrapped in cloth, walked toward the dumpster. Julian's throat closed. She lifted the lid, placed the bundle inside, stood there, staring down. Then, Derek's phone rang, cutting through the silence. He answered, listened. His face went white. Mr. Marshall, his voice was tight. You need to take this. He handed Julian the phone. Mr. Marshall? A woman's voice, professional but strained. This is St. Catherine's Hospital. We have Madison Marshall here. She was admitted 3 days ago after an overdose. She's alive, but barely. You need to come now. Julian's hand gripped the phone so hard it almost cracked. We're on our way. He hung up, looked at Angela, at Emma, at the baby, and realized everything he thought he knew about his life had just been torn apart. But the worst part? He still didn't know the full truth about what Madison had done that night, or why. The car was silent except for the baby's soft breathing. Julian drove. Angela sat in the back with the baby in her arms. Emma squeezed between them, her small hand resting on Angela's knee. Nobody spoke for the first 10 minutes. Julian's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his mind racing through everything he should have done differently, everything he'd missed. Mr. Marshall. Angela's voice was barely a whisper. I need to tell you something. He glanced at her in the rearview mirror. The night I found him. He wasn't crying at first. He was so cold he couldn't even make a sound. Julian's jaw tightened. I thought he was already gone, Angela continued, her voice breaking. But then I felt his little chest move, just barely, and I ran. I wrapped him in my coat and ran to my room and turned the heat up as high as it would go. Emma looked up at her. You saved him. I prayed, Angela whispered. I prayed harder than I've ever prayed in my life. I said, God, please don't let this baby die. Not like this. Not alone. Julian's throat burned. Why didn't you call 911? His voice came out rougher than he meant it to. Angela was quiet for a moment. Because I was scared, she said finally. Scared they'd take him. Scared they'd blame me. Scared nobody would believe that I was just trying to help. Julian pulled onto the highway. The hospital was 20 minutes away. I should have trusted you. The words felt like glass coming out. "I looked at you and assumed the worst. I didn't even give you a chance to explain." "You were scared too," Angela said softly. "That's not an excuse." Emma's small voice cut through the tension. "Daddy, is Aunt Madison going to be okay?" Julian's hands tightened on the wheel. "I don't know, sweetheart. Is she sick?" "Yes, very sick. In her body or her heart." Julian's eyes burned. His 8-year-old daughter understood more than he'd given her credit for. "Her heart," he said quietly. "Her heart is very, very sick." Emma looked down at the baby. "But her heart made him. So part of her heart is still good, right?" Angela's tears fell silently. Julian couldn't answer. They drove past exit signs, strip malls, gas stations, normal life moving around them while their world was falling apart. "What if she doesn't want to see us?" Angela asked suddenly. "What if she's angry I didn't let him go?" "Then we'll deal with it," Julian said. "But she needs to know he's alive. She needs to see that." The hospital sign appeared ahead. St. Catherine's Medical Center, 2 miles. Julian took the exit. And as they pulled into the parking lot, one thought burned through his mind louder than anything else. What if they were already too late? What if Madison had given up completely? And what if seeing this baby alive, breathing, safe, was the one thing that could either save her or destroy her? The psychiatric ward smelled like disinfectant and despair. A nurse led them down a long hallway. Her shoes squeaked against the tile. "She's been very quiet," the nurse said softly. "Hasn't spoken since she woke up." They stopped at room 247. The nurse knocked gently, then pushed the door open. Madison sat in a chair by the window, thin, so thin Julian barely recognized her. Her hair hung limply around her face, hospital gown sliding off her shoulders. She didn't turn when they entered. "Madison." Julian's voice came out rough. She flinched. Angela stepped forward slowly, the baby in her arms. "Madison, it's Angela. I found him 3 days ago. He was cold, but I warmed him up. I kept him safe, just like you asked." Madison's shoulders tensed. Then she saw the baby's reflection in the window glass. Her whole body started shaking. "No." The word came out broken. "He's supposed to be gone. Madison, he's okay. I left him there so he wouldn't suffer." Her voice cracked. "So he wouldn't grow up knowing his mother wanted to die." Julian moved closer. "Madison, look at me." She shook her head. "I can't. Every time I look at him, all I see is David, your brother, the man you abandoned." The words hit Julian like a fist. "You cut him off when he needed you most," Madison whispered. "And then he died. And I was pregnant. And I had nobody." She finally turned around. Her face was hollow, eyes swollen and red. "I went to your mother 3 months ago. Told her I was pregnant. Begged for help." Her voice dropped. She said, "Handle it privately. The Marshall name can't afford another embarrassment." Julian's blood went cold. "So I did. I gave birth alone. Lived in my car for 2 weeks. And when I looked at that baby and felt nothing, I brought him to the one person I thought might care." She looked at Angela. "And you did." Angela's tears fell silently. "He needs you, Madison," she whispered. "He needs his mother." "I'm not a mother. I'm broken." Madison's voice shattered. "Why else would I leave him in a dumpster?" The baby stirred, started to cry. Madison covered her ears, started rocking. "Make it stop, please." Julian knelt in front of her chair. "You're right. I failed, David. I let my pride kill my brother." His voice broke. "But you didn't fail this baby. You brought him to someone who could save him. That was brave." Madison's hands slowly dropped. Her eyes drifted to the baby. "He looks like David," she whispered. Angela took a step forward. "Do you want to hold him?" Madison's hands trembled. She opened her mouth to answer, and the door burst open. Eleanor Marshall stood there, Julian's mother, perfectly dressed, makeup flawless. Her eyes swept the room, landed on the baby, then on Madison. "What," she said coldly, "is going on here?" Eleanor's heels clicked against the hospital floor as she stepped inside. Her eyes moved from Madison to the baby, then to Julian. "So it's true," she said. Her voice was calm, too calm. "David's widow had a child and kept it hidden." Julian stood slowly. "Mother, don't." She held up one hand. "I received a very disturbing call from the hospital. Imagine my shock when they told me Madison was here, alive, with a baby." Madison shrank back in her chair. "You knew," Julian said quietly. "3 months ago, she came to you for help." Eleanor's face didn't change. "I offered her practical advice. You turned her away. I suggested she handle the situation privately, as any reasonable person would." Angela's arms tightened around the baby. She was pregnant and grieving. She needed family. Eleanor's gaze shifted to Angela, cold, measuring. "And who are you to speak on family matters?" "She's the one who saved him," Julian said, his voice hard now. "When Madison left him to die, Angela used her last dollar to keep him alive." Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line. "Left him where, exactly?" "In a dumpster," Madison whispered, her voice barely audible. "Behind the kitchen. I left my son in a dumpster because I had nowhere else to go." The room went silent. Eleanor stared at her, and for just a moment, just a flicker, something passed across her face, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. "Then it's fortunate someone found him," Eleanor said coolly. "Now we can arrange proper care, a private adoption, discreet. The child will have a good life, and Madison can receive the help she clearly needs." "No." Julian's voice cut through the room like a blade. Eleanor turned to him. "Excuse me, he's not being adopted out. He's David's son. He's family. Julian, be reasonable." "I'm done being reasonable." His voice rose. "I'm done protecting the Marshall name while people suffer. David died because I cared more about image than my own brother. I won't make that mistake again." Eleanor's jaw tightened. "You're being emotional." "I'm being human." Emma, who'd been silent this whole time, stepped forward. Her small voice filled the space. "Grandma, why don't you love us?" Eleanor froze. "Emma, that's not... You didn't help Aunt Madison when she was sad. You didn't help the baby. You only care about our last name." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "But names don't hug you. People do." Eleanor looked at her granddaughter, and for the first time since she'd entered the room, her mask cracked. Just slightly. "Emma, you don't understand. I understand that Angela loves us more than you do." The words hung in the air like smoke. Eleanor's face went pale. Julian put his hand on Emma's shoulder, looked at his mother. "She's right, and until you can see that, you're not welcome around this child." Eleanor's eyes went wide. "Julian, you can't possibly—" "I just did." For a long moment, Eleanor stood there, silent, her perfect composure finally cracking at the edges. Then she turned on her heel and walked out. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Madison looked up at Julian, her face wet with tears. "You just lost your mother because of me." "No," Julian said quietly. "I just found my family." But as he said the words, his phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from an unknown number. He opened it, and his blood turned to ice. The message was simple, only 4 words. "She's not the only one." Julian stared at his phone. "She's not the only one." His heart pounded in his chest. "What is it?" Angela asked. Julian looked up. Madison was watching him from her chair. Emma stood close to Angela, one hand resting on the baby's blanket. "I just got a text," he said slowly, "from a number I don't recognize." "What does it say?" He held up the phone so Angela could see. Her face went pale. Madison's eyes widened. "Wait, what does that mean?" "I don't know." Julian's mind raced. "Do you know anyone else who knew about the baby?" Madison shook her head. "Nobody. I didn't tell anyone. That was the whole point. I was too ashamed." Julian looked at the message again, then at Madison. "Think carefully. The night you left him, did anyone see you? Anyone at all?" Madison's face crumpled as she tried to remember. "I don't. I was barely there. I drove up, put him down, and left. It was dark. There was no one around." "What about before that? At the hospital? When you gave birth?" "I used my maiden name. Monroe. Madison Monroe. Nobody knew who I really was." Julian's jaw tightened. "Then who sent this?" The room fell silent. Emma's small voice broke through. "Maybe someone was trying to help." Julian looked down at his daughter. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Maybe someone saw Aunt Madison and wanted to make sure the baby was okay. So they're telling you now." Angela nodded slowly. She might be right. If someone knew Madison was in trouble, maybe they've been watching, waiting to see if the baby survived. Julian's phone buzzed again. Another text. "Check the hospital records. September 15th. labor and delivery. You'll understand. His hands trembled as he typed back, "Who is this?" 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then one final message came through. Someone who should have spoken up sooner. "I'm sorry." Julian looked at Madison. "September 15th. That's when you gave birth?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Did anything happen that day? Anything unusual?" Madison's breath caught. "There was a nurse. She stayed with me the whole time because I was alone. She kept asking if I had anyone to call. I told her no. I told her I had nobody. Do you remember her name? She didn't wear a name tag. Or maybe she did and I don't remember. I was so tired, so empty." Julian pulled up the number and tried calling it. It rang once, then a recorded message. "The number you have dialed is not in service." He looked at Angela, at Madison, at Emma. "Someone knows what happened, and they're trying to tell us something." Angela's voice was barely a whisper. "What if there's another baby?" The words hung in the air like a weight. Madison's face went white. "No, that's not possible. I only had one." "Not yours," Angela said carefully. "But what if someone else left a baby that night? What if someone else was desperate like you were?" Julian's mind spun. Madison covered her mouth with her hand. "Oh God," she whispered. "There was a girl, in the hallway, young, maybe 17. She was crying, alone. The nurse went to her after she finished with me." Julian's blood ran cold. "What happened to her?" "I don't know. I left before morning. I couldn't stay there." Julian looked at the text again. "She's not the only one." His phone buzzed one more time. A photo this time. He opened it, and his heart stopped. It was a picture of a hospital bassinet, empty, with a handwritten note taped to the side. "Please forgive me. I can't do this. L." Julian showed the photo to Angela. Her hand flew to her mouth. Madison leaned forward from her chair, squinting at the screen. When she saw it, she went completely still. "That's the same hospital," she whispered. "That's the same floor I was on." Julian's hands shook. "When was this taken?" He checked the metadata on the photo. His stomach dropped. "September 15th, 11:47 p.m. The same night Madison gave birth." Angela's voice was barely audible. "There was another baby." Julian looked at her. "And someone took this picture. Someone knew." "But why wait 3 days to tell anyone?" Madison asked, her voice rising. "If there was another baby, why didn't they?" She stopped. Her face crumpled. "Because no one reported it," she said quietly. "Just like no one reported mine." The truth settled over them like ice water. 2 women, 2 babies, both abandoned on the same night, and no one had said a word. Julian's phone rang. He answered immediately. "Mr. Marshall?" It was a woman's voice, older, shaking. "My name is Diane Porter. I'm a nurse at County General. I sent you those messages." Julian's pulse quickened. "Where's the baby? The one in the photo?" Silence on the other end. "Miss Porter, where is the baby?" "I don't know." Her voice broke. "The girl, she was 17. She gave birth alone. No family, no ID. She left the baby in the bassinet and disappeared before morning rounds. And you didn't report it." "I tried." Diane's voice cracked. "I told my supervisor. She said the girl probably came back for the baby during shift change, that it happens sometimes. She told me not to make a fuss, not to create paperwork for nothing." Julian's jaw clenched. "So you just let it go?" "No." Diane was crying now. "I checked the security footage myself. I saw the girl leave, alone, empty-handed. I saw someone else come in 20 minutes later. A man. He took the baby and walked out like it was nothing." Angela grabbed Julian's arm. "Did you see his face?" "No. He wore a hood. But I have the footage. I saved it before they could delete it." "They tried to delete it?" Julian's voice went cold. "The hospital doesn't want this getting out. 2 abandoned babies in one night? Do you know what that would do to their reputation?" Madison stood up slowly, her legs shaking. "So they covered it up." "I'm so sorry," Diane whispered. "I should have done more. I should have called the police. But I was scared of losing my job. And then I saw the news about your nephew, about your housekeeper saving him. And I realized that you could have saved the other one too," Julian finished. Diane sobbed on the other end. Julian closed his eyes. "Send me the footage. Everything you have. Right now." "Okay. But Mr. Marshall, there's something else you need to know. What? The girl, before she left, she wrote something on the whiteboard in her room. Just 2 words. Julian's heart pounded. What did she write? Diane's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Help me. The line went dead. Julian looked at Angela, at Madison, at Emma, standing there with her small hand on the baby's blanket, and he realized something that made his blood run cold. Someone had taken that second baby, on purpose, and if they didn't find him soon, they might never find him at all. His phone buzzed. The footage came through. Julian opened it with shaking hands, and what he saw made everything worse. Because the man in the hood? He wasn't a stranger. Julian had seen him before. Julian hit play on the video. The footage was grainy, black and white, time-stamped September 15th, 11:52 p.m. A figure entered the hospital room, hood pulled low, moving quickly but not running. He walked straight to the bassinet, looked down, then lifted the baby out with both hands, cradled it against his chest, and walked out. The whole thing took 43 seconds. Julian rewound it, paused on the moment the man's face turned slightly toward the camera, just for a split second, but it was enough. Angela leaned closer. Do you know him? Julian's mouth went dry. That's Paul. Who's Paul? My driver. Julian's voice came out hollow. He's worked for me for 8 years. The room went silent. Madison's hands gripped the arms of her chair. Your driver took a baby from the hospital? I don't understand. Julian's mind raced. Why would he? And then it hit him. Paul's daughter. 3 months ago, Paul had asked for time off, said his daughter was going through something. Family emergency. Julian had approved it without asking questions, because he never asked questions. He just signed papers and moved on. His daughter, Julian whispered. She's 17. She got pregnant last year. He was devastated, said she was too young, that her life would be ruined. Angela's face went pale. You think she's the girl who gave birth that night? I don't know. But if she was... Julian stopped. His hands were shaking now. If she was, and Paul knew she couldn't keep the baby. Maybe he thought he was helping her. Maybe he took the baby to give it to someone. Or maybe he left it somewhere, Madison said quietly. Just like I did. The words hung heavy in the air. Julian looked at the baby in Angela's arms. This tiny nephew, who'd almost died because the people who were supposed to love him had failed. And now there was another one, another child, another desperate mother, another man making a terrible choice. We have to find him, Julian said. His voice was steady now, resolved. We have to find Paul, and we have to find that baby. Emma tugged on his sleeve. Daddy, what if the baby's already gone? Julian knelt down, looked his daughter in the eyes. Then we'll make sure people know what happened, so it never happens again. But even as he said it, he didn't believe it, because the truth was darker than that. People had known. The hospital knew, the supervisor knew, Diane knew, and they'd all chosen silence. Just like he'd chosen silence when David needed him. Just like Eleanor had chosen silence when Madison begged for help. Angela's voice broke through his thoughts. Julian, what if Paul's daughter is still out there? What if she's like Madison, alone, scared, thinking she has no one? Julian stood slowly. Then we find her too. He pulled out his phone, dialed Paul's number. It rang, and rang, and rang. Then, voicemail. Paul, it's Julian. I need you to call me back immediately. It's urgent. He hung up, looked at the others. We're going to his house, right now. Madison stood up, her legs still shaky. I'm coming with you. Madison, you need to rest. No. Her voice was firm, stronger than it had been all day. That girl, whoever she is, she's me. And if there's any chance I can help her, I have to try. Julian looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something he hadn't seen before. Strength. Angela nodded. We all go. They walked out of the hospital together, and as they reached the parking lot, Julian's phone buzzed one more time. A text from Paul's phone, but the words weren't Paul's. Please don't come looking for us. It's already too late. Julian's car tore through the streets. Paul lived 20 minutes outside the city, a small house on a quiet street. White fence, normal, forgettable. Nobody spoke during the drive. When they pulled up, the house was dark. Julian killed the engine. Stay here, he said. No. Angela was already unbuckling. We go together. They walked to the front door. Julian knocked. Nothing. He knocked again. Harder this time. Still, nothing. Paul, Julian's voice echoed down the empty street. I know you're in there. Open the door. Silence. Then a sound, faint, from inside. Crying. Not a baby. A girl. Julian's heart stopped. Paul, I'm not leaving. Either you open this door, or I'm calling the police. A long pause. Then the lock clicked. The door opened slowly. Paul stood there. Mid-50s. Grey hair disheveled, eyes red and swollen. He looked broken. Mr. Marshall, he whispered. You shouldn't be here. Where's your daughter? Paul's face crumpled. Upstairs. And the baby? Paul's knees buckled. He grabbed the doorframe to steady himself. He's gone. Angela gasped. What do you mean, gone? Julian's voice was sharp. I tried. Paul's voice cracked. I swear to God I tried. But she couldn't keep him. She's 17. No money. No support. I thought I was protecting her. So what did you do? Julian stepped closer. I took him to a church. Paul's tears fell freely now. St. Mary's, 2 towns over. I left him in a basket at the back door during Sunday service. I thought someone would find him, someone who could give him a real life. Madison pushed past Julian. When did you leave him? This morning, right after dawn. Angela's eyes went wide. That was hours ago. Did anyone find him? I don't know, Paul sobbed. I drove away. I couldn't watch. I couldn't. Julian pulled out his phone, started dialing. What church? Which one exactly? St. Mary's on Oakwood. But Mr. Marshall, I already called them an hour ago. They said no one found a baby. They checked everywhere. Julian froze mid-dial. Then where is he? The question hung in the air like smoke. From upstairs, the crying got louder. A girl's voice, broken, desperate. Daddy, where's my baby? Please, where's my baby? Paul covered his face with his hands. She didn't want to give him up. I made her. I told her it was the only way. And now he's gone, and I don't know where he is, and she's... He couldn't finish. Madison moved past him, headed for the stairs. Madison, wait, Julian started. But she was already climbing. She reached the top, pushed open a bedroom door. A girl sat on the floor, thin, pale, rocking back and forth, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold the pieces together. She looked up when Madison entered. Their eyes met, and Madison saw herself. She dropped to her knees in front of the girl. I'm Madison, she said softly, and 3 days ago I left my baby in a dumpster because I thought he'd be better off without me. The girl's eyes widened. But he wasn't, Madison continued, her voice breaking. He needed me, and your baby needs you too, so we're going to find him. Together. Do you hear me? We're going to bring him home. The girl's face crumpled. What if we're too late? Then we'll face it together, Madison whispered. But I don't think we are, because someone's been watching over these babies, someone who won't let them disappear. She took the girl's hands in hers. What's your name? Lily, the girl whispered. Lily, when's the last time you prayed? Lily shook her head. I don't know if God hears people like me. He does, Madison said. I promise you, he does. Downstairs, Julian's phone rang. He answered. Mr. Marshall? A woman's voice, unfamiliar. My name is Father Michael from St. Mary's. We just found something unusual in our donation box. Julian's heart pounded. What did you find? A baby boy, wrapped in a hospital blanket. He's safe. But Mr. Marshall, what? There's a note with him. It has your phone number on it. They found him at St. Mary's an hour later. Father Michael met them at the door, an older man with kind eyes and gentle hands. He led them to his office, and there, sleeping in a makeshift cradle made from a donation box lined with blankets, was a baby boy. Lily ran to him, dropped to her knees, lifted him into her arms, and sobbed. Not from sadness this time, from relief, from joy, from something she thought she'd lost forever. I'm sorry, she whispered into his tiny ear. I'm so sorry, baby. Mama's here now. Mama's here. Paul stood in the doorway, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry, he said to no one and everyone. I thought I was protecting her. I thought... You were scared, Julian said quietly. We all were. Madison sat beside Lily on the floor, put her arm around the girl's shoulders. It's going to be okay, she whispered. You're not alone anymore. Lily looked at her. How did you survive it? The shame? The feeling like you ruined everything? Madison smiled through her tears. I didn't. Not alone. But then I met people who saw me, really saw me, and they didn't let me disappear. She looked at Angela. Angela, still holding baby David, knelt down beside them. You're both mothers, she said softly. Broken, scared, beautiful mothers. And these babies? They don't need perfect. They just need you, present, trying, loving them, even when it's hard. Emma stepped forward, looked at both babies. They're so small, she whispered, but they made all of us bigger. Julian pulled his daughter close. She was right. These two tiny boys, abandoned, almost lost, had torn open every wall he'd built, every lie he'd told himself about what family meant. Father Michael cleared his throat gently. What happens now? Julian looked at Paul, at Lily, at Madison, at Angela holding his nephew. Now, he said slowly, we build something better. 3 months later, the Marshall estate looked different. Madison lived in the guest house, healthy and working as a volunteer counselor for new mothers. Lily and her son lived there too, finishing her senior year online while Paul helped with childcare. Angela had her own cottage on the property, renovated, beautiful, with a nursery where baby David slept safely every night. And Julian? He'd cut his work travel by 70%, started a foundation with one mission. No mother should ever feel so alone that abandoning her child feels like the only option. They called it the David and Daniel Foundation, for the two boys who almost disappeared. On a Sunday morning in December, they all gathered in the south garden. Emma sat on the grass between the two babies, making them giggle. Madison and Lily talked quietly on the bench, sharing the kind of stories only they could understand. Paul stood nearby, watching his daughter laugh for the first time in months. Angela sat beside Julian. You did it, she said softly. You built a family. We did it, Julian corrected. You showed me how. No, Angela smiled. God showed you. I just didn't let you look away. Julian looked around at the people scattered across his lawn. Broken people, messy people, people who'd made terrible choices and somehow found grace anyway. Do you think they'll be okay? He asked. Angela watched Emma lift baby David into her lap. I think they already are. And as the December sun warmed their faces, Julian realized something he'd never understood before. Wealth wasn't what you kept. It was what you gave away when someone needed it most. Power wasn't control. It was kneeling down when someone was too broken to stand. And family? Family wasn't blood. It was showing up, again and again and again, even when it cost you everything. Especially then,